most of us cannot imagine Portland without it, and we'd feel we had to invent it if it didn't already exist. I'm happy to announce that we have 2 new members today that I know of, Bob Wise, who's a Green Oregon guy down here, and Alan Alley. Yes. I hope you will join them by joining City Club. There are several new members who are here today for the first time that I would like to introduce. Could you please stand when you hear your name? Could you all please hold your applause and then welcome everyone at the end? Our new members are Kate Willis, Dave Van Liebman, Judith Buffo, Carol Royal, and Mai Fee Vesquez. Could you all stand and be welcome to City Club? Next Friday's forum, February 2nd, is called Rant 3, where 3 local media figures let loose and skewer local and national politics. This year, Scott Moore, Jack Oman, and Victoria Taft will take the stage at this not-to-be-missed Friday forum. When these 3 get together, we never know what will happen. Please come and see. You're invited to a little party tonight. Today is the last Friday of the month, and City Club is having a reception, as we always do, the final Friday. Club members and their guests are invited to come to City Club Commons for conversation and refreshments. We'll start at 4:30, be done by 6. Hope to see you there. I'm going to give you just headlines of upcoming events. You can find details on these events in your program or on the City Club website. Please check your bulletin. On Monday the 29th, we have Citizens Read. On Tuesday the 30th, we have Agora Healthcare Forum. On Wednesday the 31st, we have the Young Women's Social Entrepreneurs Gathering, and City Club is a co-sponsor. So hope you can come to some or all of these events. We are so fortunate in Portland to have great corporate citizens that help make these programs possible every week. I'd like to thank our sponsors this quarter. They are Girding Edlin Development Company, LLC, and McEwen Giswald, LLP. Would you please join me in thanking them? Our program today is entitled Oregon's Green Economy, and what a timely subject this is. Against the backdrop of increasing industrialization, rising consumption, our continued dependence on fossil fuels, and everyday stories about global warming, Oregonians are talking about green buildings, clean energy, creating a wave park, biofuels, and much more. The Oregon Business Plan envisions building on Oregon's international reputation, our competitive advantage, to create sustainable goods, services, environmental, and business practices. Now, perhaps some of you are here today simply to understand what it means to build an economy around sustainability. Others of you are skeptical, wondering how sustainability goes from being a cost to being an asset. Our speaker, Alan Alley, a person who was once equally or even more skeptical, will be talking about this subject. When Alan Alley left Pixelworks last December, where he was co-founder, president, CEO, and chairman of the board, he had the choices you'd expect that he'd have: starting another company or going into a venture capital business. But he'd built companies before. What he really wanted to do was bridge the great divide between private enterprise and the public service. So Alan, a Republican, became our governor's deputy chief of staff for economic development, innovation, and technology. He's now been on the job for all of 1 week. A little something more you should know about Alan. Alan has an avocation on the side. Having attended many charity auctions in his life, he has become a volunteer auctioneer, mostly for his kids' elementary school and high school auctions. I've asked Alan not to talk too fast today, even if you have your hands up in the air. Please welcome Chairman of the Oregon Business Plan, engineer, entrepreneur, auctioneer, and public servant, Alan Alley.
Thank you, Susan. That was That was much more than I expected. I'm still not used to this job. As many of you know, I recently joined the governor's staff in Salem after retiring as CEO of Pixelworks, a company I co-founded here in Oregon. Since I'm a former CEO of a publicly traded company, some old habits are hard to break. Today, I will be making some forward-looking statements. Although I'm quickly learning that in government, it's virtually impossible to forecast the future, especially this early in a legislative session. Such statements are based on current expectations, estimates, projections, and my lack of understanding of the latest position of the Republican and Democratic caucuses. These statements are certainly not guarantees of future performance. They involve certain risks and uncertainties and assumptions that are difficult to predict. Actual results could, let's just say they will, vary materially from the description contained herein due to many factors, including the war in Iraq, global climate change, trade relations with China, illegal immigration, the March economic forecast, and adequate funding for our education system. For further risk factors, please refer to the editorial section of the newspapers and talk to your state representatives and senators. My first week in Salem has been an eye-opening experience. I'm overwhelmed by the intelligence and the passion of the people involved in building and running our state. I've had many eye-opening experiences over the first week, and I just wanted to share one of them with you. As a business person, I could not imagine the scope of the problems faced by the people in government on a daily basis. In business, it's all about focus. For example, at Pixelworks, if you look at the domain of companies, we were a technology company, we were a semiconductor company, we were a fabless semiconductor company doing largely digital semiconductors, system-on-a-chip applications for flat panel displays. That's pretty focused. Now, the relationships that we had were very, very deep. We had many, many, many deep relationships within that focus. In contrast, in my first week on the job, I've been involved in discussions ranging from climate change initiatives to healthy kids, to recruiting companies to our state, to cigarette taxes, to the Newburgh-Dundee bypass, to reviewing appointments for the Cultural Trust, Measure 37 issues, and funding for education. It's quite a change. And that's just a small sampling. In business, you're focused on a strategic direction, plus or minus just a couple of degrees. In the government, your focus isn't on just a couple of degrees, it's really 360 degrees, and in fact, it's more than that because occasionally you're just walking along and a meteor drops on your head as well. So you have to be watching above all at the same time. I have great admiration for the people that do this work. Today I'm here to talk to you about sustainability and enlighten you about my own personal journey on this issue that Susan alluded to. Lately, there's been a plethora of discussions on climate change and alternative energy. On Wednesday, the governor received reports from 3 commissions, the Global Warming Advisory Group, the Climate Change Group, and the Carbon Allocation Task Force. The reports were very consistent. The science is irrefutable. Our climate is changing. The Earth is getting warmer, ice is melting, glaciers are receding, species like the polar bear are becoming endangered. The polar bear is a victim of climate change. Even though they join us near the very top of the food chain, they're completely powerless to do anything about their environment. Climate change is real. The question that we face is, are we going to act like nothing more than a polar bear and let it happen to us, or are we going to step up and do something about it? As a business leader, I never allowed anyone in my company to ever think like a victim. Once you do, you lose. We must unite as a species and as custodians of our planet to do everything in our power to preserve the most precious resource in our galaxy, our Earth. Mark Twain, thank you. Mark Twain once said, "Everyone talks about the weather, but nobody does anything about it." And that's certainly true if you're a polar bear. It's not true if you're a human. And it certainly isn't true if you're an Oregonian. You may now be asking yourself, who is this polar bear hugging guy? I thought we were going to hear from a former venture capitalist and a CEO. And as we all know, the only more carnivorous creature in the business kingdom than a lawyer is a venture capitalist. By now, you must assume that I have officially lost my spots. Although until recently, I never officially worked in the Oregon Department of Economic Development, I have been virtually consulting with the department since 1988. I was one of the early investors in Infocus Systems, was a co-founder of Pixelworks. It's been one of my great joys to watch Pixelworks grow and reach heights that were once unimagined by the 5 of us who founded the company, with nothing more than an idea, our resumes, the faith and confidence of our families and the community. We began with 5 founders in 1997 with $10,000 from our personal savings accounts. We used to compete for who could buy the least expensive lunch, a record I still proudly hold at 39 cents. That's a 39-cent bean burrito from Taco Bell and a cup of water, and all the hot sauce you could stuff in your pockets. Today, Pixelworks has matured into a teenage company where they spend more than $1 million a year flying all over the world to connect with their customers and their global engineering teams. My role as a corporate executive has afforded me with wonderful opportunities like delivering this message to you today. I got to travel the world. I got to meet regularly with political and business leaders. I've rendered my opinions and observations on industry and policy to leaders, and sometimes I've even seen my ideas transformed into action. These opportunities and experiences have certainly shaped my outlook, but I try to remain grounded in the notion that I am who I am, not because of these opportunities, but rather I have created these opportunities because of who I am. So who am I? I'm a corporate executive, a father, a husband, a coach, and now I'm a public servant. I also, at various times, have been an entrepreneur, an automobile enthusiast, and a football fan. I'm the son of an actress and her husband, an engineer, who actually moonlighted as a nightclub singer. 3 of my grandparents were immigrants hailing from Lebanon, Scotland, and Italy. My other grandmother was of Irish descent and was a cousin of Ronald Reagan's. In my immediate family, I have cousins who are Muslim, Protestant, and Jewish. I have a cousin who is a Catholic priest and was ordained in the Vatican. At various times in my career, I have worked in aerospace for a big automaker as a venture capitalist in high tech. In these positions, I've served as an engineer, marketeer, and financier. I am an Oregonian, and I think from my background you can tell I am an American. But above all, I'm an earthling. I'm one of 6.4 billion other people who, under our skin, eyes, hair, clothes of a rainbow of hues, are trying to accomplish the same thing: peace and prosperity for ourselves and for our children. A few short weeks ago, I had the honor to MC the Oregon Business Plan Summit meeting at the Convention Center. We rolled out a plan for the state to help guide our economic development. The plan was created by some of the best and brightest leaders who volunteered thousands of hours of their time to put forth a package of initiatives for our state. These initiatives are truly a labor of love. They are vitalized by the deep affection that each and every Oregonian knows for this great place that we call home. I've spent 10 years leading a global business with its heart in Oregon. I've traveled more than 1 million miles and at times have gotten to know the employees of Northwest Airlines better than the employees of our own company. During this time, I've developed a keen awareness of exactly what it takes to be globally competitive and be a global leader. And after reviewing the business plan for 2007, I can tell Oregon's business leaders understand what it takes as well. Since its inception in 2002, as Susan mentioned, the business plan has used 4 Ps as its organizing precepts: pioneering innovation, people, productivity, and place. Last year, we rightfully added a 5th P for progress. From public finance reform to transportation investments, the business plan has advocated for and achieved big victories for Oregon and the Oregon economy. At our conference in 2006, some of you may have been there, we heard from Dr. Michael Porter of Harvard. In very dramatic fashion, we had those huge screens. A very animated Michael Porter challenged us to take the plan and our progress to the next level. When we were preparing for the summit for this year, we discussed what Dr. Porter had said in our steering committee meeting, and everybody had a slightly different opinion about what he had said. Each of us had different versions, somewhat colored by our own perceptions. To refresh our memories, we went back and reviewed what Dr. Porter had said. When Dr. Porter talked about our plan, he was pretty brutal. In fact, when I reviewed the recording, I broke out in a cold sweat thinking back to Purdue University in 1975 and Professor Frank Incropiro's Thermodynamics 501 class. You all know the feeling. You thought you were prepared, but then faced with that smell of fresh chalk under those wonderful fluorescent light bulbs in the lecture hall, you panic and realize, I'm just not prepared. We were not prepared for Dr. Porter in 2006. Porter said, differentiate, unique value proposition, global competitiveness. Porter admonished us that we had not clearly defined what makes us special, what makes us unique, and more importantly, how does that unique position compel the rest of the world? Why does the world want to do business with us? What is Oregon better at than anywhere else in the world? What is our passion? What is it that we can take the unassailable mantle of global leadership that would allow us to lead for the next 50 years? We pondered this question and had a lively debate. Dr. Porter suggested that sustainability, economic development in harmony with the planet could be our differentiation strategy. When this was brought up in the planning meeting, the CEO and me recoiled in abject horror. My first reaction was, architecting a business for sustainability means cost, and additional cost means diminished, not enhanced global competitiveness. You might as well tie my hands behind my back, blindfold me, put my feet in cement, and cast me into the shark-infested waters of international business. As the discussion built momentum, I began to reflect on it and my reaction. And it felt very similar to a debate I had remembered from 30 years ago. That debate was about quality and how dramatically raising our quality would add so much cost that we would become uncompetitive. That discussion took place in 1976 in Dearborn, Michigan, at the Ford Motor Company, as we debated how were we going to compete with Honda and Toyota. We believed that quality required more inspection and more rework, and that would mean more cost. We also believed that consumers would not pay for quality or make buying decisions based on quality. We believed that they didn't care about service or an improved ownership experience. We believed that lower cost was our only path to competitiveness, so we actually lowered quality, cut corners, fought with our unions, and designed for lowest cost, and in the way, lost our way. We believe quality and cost would ultimately destroy competitiveness, a premise that was not only false, that in fact, the reality was completely the opposite. Quality, if engineered in from the beginning, actually could lower overall cost of ownership, improve the ownership experience, and sustain customer loyalty. Ford learned the hard way. In Oregon, we need to do the same. I realized as we sat around our steering committee table debating the economic impact of sustainability in 2006, I was reliving my 1976 Ford discussion. I began to postulate that sustainable business practices could differentiate our region, and we could show the world how economic development in harmony with our planet is not only the right civic thing to do, it's the right business decision. Since that meeting, I've made several trips to China and have discussed this idea with other global business partners. The bottom line is the world wants to develop in harmony with the environment, but they really don't know how. They believe, in the same way we've believed at Ford, that sustainable development costs money and global competitiveness. We were wrong 30 years ago, and I, for one, am not about to make the same mistake twice. I believe it's possible to have tremendous economic growth, and it is possible, in fact, it's essential to do it in harmony with the planet. And furthermore, I believe the keys to the answer will be and how it will be accomplished already exist in our state. Tangible evidence of this occurred earlier this week when Governor Kulongoski hosted a roundtable discussion in Salem. We already have done many things to position Oregon as the thought leader on this subject. We've worked on a regional level with our partners in Washington and California, enacting our Clean Cars proposal and reducing diesel emissions along I-5. The governor has directed state agencies to use 100% renewable electricity by 2010 and to create a truly green state vehicle fleet with more efficient hybrid vehicles and vehicles that run on ethanol. There are currently 5 critical bills in the legislature that will accelerate our efforts to put Oregon at the front of the pack nationally on this issue. The governor has put forth an ambitious renewable portfolio standard of 25% by 2025. We won't be the first state to implement an RPS, but we are better positioned than most to achieve it because all of the ingredients of that portfolio lie within our boundaries, from wave to biomass to wind and biofuels. The approach isn't just about mandates, it's about providing incentives to encourage use and production of alternative energy and fuels through the business energy tax credit and the residential energy tax credit. It's clear to me, as it is for more and more Oregonians, that the only viable pathway for this state and this nation is to move aggressively forward in combating global warming, diversifying our renewable energy resources, and transitioning to an energy economy not reliant on fossil fuels. This vision will create sustainability not only for our environment, but also our economy. 2 days ago, I met with the governor and former Congressman Dick Gephardt and representatives from Goldman Sachs. You know, we've turned a corner when Wall Street banks are telling you that investments in renewable energy and other technologies to combat global warming are among the largest economic opportunities that they see in the future. The meeting with Congressman Gephardt got me thinking about one of my previous careers as a venture capitalist, where I developed my somewhat infamous surfing analogy for technology and investing. Over the years, I would meet with entrepreneurs who came to me to pitch me on their latest innovation. Most of the time, they focused on the product and the technology that they had developed. They'd go into excruciating detail describing the technical merits of their machine, how it was smaller, lighter, faster, and less expensive than anything ever before or even imagined. At the end of their pitch, they'd be glowing with passion, their product and the brilliance of their eloquence. I would pause, and usually I'd just say, "Do you know where the waves are?" And they'd look at me like the RCA Victor dog standing in front of the Victrola, tilting their head from side to side, bemused because I never asked them about the technology or the product. I'd go on to tell them the point of venture investing is not the technology, it's identifying market waves. What they had just done was describe a virtual surfboard that they had designed and all of the wonderful features of their design. But what I really care about is, can they identify the market wave? Can they show me tangible proof that they have the market clairvoyance to see the future and to predict the market waves, and when will they crest? Their board, if it is what they represent, will allow them to ride the wave and will give them advantages over competition on inferior surfboards. Their management skill will allow them to navigate the wave and extract every ounce of energy for that wave. My capital that they're asking me to provide will supply the energy necessary for us to paddle in the tranquil waters of an early stage company and allow us to position properly to catch the wave when it arrives. I've seen some huge waves in my career. Personal computers, local area networks, cell phones, and the internet are all waves that I have personally experienced. But now I believe the largest wave of all is right off the coast of Oregon. In fact, I think it's the largest wave since the invention of the automobile. That wave, figuratively and literally, is the transformation of our entire energy economy for the first time since the start of human civilization and the discovery of fire. The integrated circuit, which is the foundation for PCs, networks, televisions, cell phones, and the internet, has gone from discovery, I'm talking about discovery, to invention, to products, to a massive global industry in the last 50 years. Semiconductors were only discovered 50 years ago. To put this in perspective, we've been writing on paper for 4,300 years. The pyramids are over 4,500 years old. The cart was invented 5,500 years ago. Pottery, 9,000 years ago. And cultivation of grain began 10,000 years ago. So one sobering thought that I had is that those of us in the semiconductor industry are 9,950 years behind the agricultural industry. So we have some catching up to do. 10,000 years is a long time. It's almost longer than you can imagine. But as I was doing this research, there's something that's even more astounding. Even though we've been farmers for 10,000 years, we've been burning things for 500,000 years, and we're still doing it today. It's frankly unimaginable that mankind, who developed electricity, the automobile, the computer, the internet, cell phones, the airplane, and has walked on the moon, is still digging 24-million-year-old fossils out of the earth and is burning them largely in the same manner that we have done for the last 500,000 years. As an engineer and an earthling, it's frankly so embarrassing, I'm beginning to wonder if we really are more closely related to the environmentally helpless polar bear than I originally thought. Let me conclude by telling you a story. There was once a place where people cared about each other. They cared so much that when a traveler got lost on their mountain, these people searched day and night to find that person. Every day, these good people published reports of the search on the front page of their newspapers. Every person in the community felt hope and despair for the travelers and their families. Many cried. A week later, a very old and a very special tree was injured in a storm. Again, the community turned out en masse to save the tree, for it represented strength, longevity, and harmony with nature. Every day, these people published reports of the tree in their newspapers. Many people in the community felt a sense of loss. Some even cried. This special place is Oregon. I can tell you from firsthand experience, when these events occur all over the world, people follow our progress daily. All over the world, people marvel at our sense of community and dedication to each other. Oregon and Oregonians represent something that everyone can relate to, but few can ever imagine achieving. We are a shining light of humanity that the world follows with admiration. Whether it's our common ethos that makes us this way, or whether it's our home, Oregon, that fashions our beliefs, the bottom line is the same. People in China do not aspire to create another soulless urban sprawl of malls and pavement. They aspire to what we have, a thriving, vibrant community that cares about each other and is building a better future for our children in harmony with our planet. I now believe it is our innate understanding of what is fundamental to the preservation of mankind and our planet that is the essential component that will provide the foundation of our leadership in global business. Thank you very much.
A privilege of membership in City Club is to be able to ask questions of the speaker. So those of you who would like to ask questions, please line up by the mic. Our first question today will be asked by board host Chip Lazenby. Chip is a member of the City Club Board of Governors. He is currently interim general counsel for Portland State University. Chip.
Thank you. I was a little taken aback when I was described as a lawyer as being at the top of the predators in the business world. But leaving that aside, Portland is known for its leadership in sustainability in a variety of different ways. And as a member of Portland Sustainable Development Commission, which is a joint county city, we see a lot of efforts here locally. And I was struck in your remarks that you mentioned that the governor met with people from Wall Street, people from Goldman Sachs. As a former venture capitalist yourself, can you give us a little bit of a SWOT analysis on how we can, what our strengths, weaknesses, and opportunities and threats are for Oregon actually to become a leader and attract a lot of that capital so that we can translate our expertise into jobs and have people chasing us as opposed to us just being a part of the parade that's starting around sustainability.
Yeah, thank you. I think there's many strengths that we have. If I start with those, first of all, an observation as an ex-automotive executive. we constantly, I think Detroit blamed high cost of labor, high cost of insurance, high cost of health care for the lack of success that we had over the last 20 years in the automotive business. And I thought about that, I reflected on it, and I said, I don't think that's true. Because somehow Germany has managed to produce vehicles that lots of Americans aspire to, and somehow Japan has done the same thing. And in Germany and Japan, their cost of labor and cost of healthcare is as high or higher than it is in the United States, which loops me back to maybe it was more of a product problem, that we just didn't design the right products, and the way we designed them wasn't the right way. So German cars, I think, are wonderful because they have autobahns and people drive them 150 miles an hour all day long, and you have to design a car to do that. What it means is that their local economy drives an ethos in the people that they're passionate about building great automobiles. If you go to Milwaukee, the people are passionate about Harley-Davidsons, and you get great Harley-Davidsons out of a people that ride them and love them and cherish them, and the community rallies around it. As far as sustainability, solar power, wave power, Oregon is passionate about that. The community is passionate about it. We as people are passionate about it. The government is passionate about it. Therefore, I think one of the greatest strengths that we have is this passion. The problem has been is that passion was connected with something that nobody else in the world for the last 50 years really cared much about. But that's all turning. This whole revolution is all turning, and it's like a light, a shaft of light has shone down on our state. That the things that we just hold dear to ourselves and the reasons why that we're here have become a global asset. And I think that's our biggest strength. Weaknesses, we're small. There's 3.7 million Oregonians. There's 1.3 billion Chinese guys. And in fact, one of the things that we have to remember is we can do all we want to clean up the environment and drive hybrid vehicles and do all the things that we need to do. But if we don't figure out a way to get China in the boat with us and India in the boat with us, it just doesn't matter. That's the economic opportunity that we have because, folks in this room, I have a lot of contacts in China. We can take what we're doing here and export it to China. But we've got to bring the rest of the world along with us. It's not good enough for us to sit here in Oregon, and it's a beautiful place, and do the right things. If the rest of the world doesn't do it, it's like nuclear fallout. It's going to affect us. I think threats are, this is a global game. When Goldman Sachs came in and talked to us, their level of interest in investment is around $1 billion. That's a B. And we have to think big. We have to think expansively. We have to think about global leadership. And I think one of the things, if anything, maybe we're a little bit apologetic. Hey, we're Oregon, we're only 3.7 million people. It's like, no, we're the center of this. That light is shining right down on us. We have to be global leaders in this area. And I think the threat would be is that we don't step up and accept that mantle of responsibility. How did you do the question?
Gilly Burlingham. For those of us who are not Goldman Sachs, but think more in thousands than millions, by the way, I know there are Horizon Wind Energy. Do you have any advice for small, socially responsible investors in Oregon?
Sure. You know, the state has a lot of incentives that we're putting in place for smaller investors to invest in energy efficient products for your homes and for your schools. I think one of the things that we haven't done enough of is publicize that and get that out. Because on the other side of this is, if this light is going to keep shining down on us, we have to do the right things. We've got to see solar cells being used in residential applications. We have to see more hybrid vehicles being used. Because if we're not the example, then people are going to turn away as well. So the thousands of dollars of investments are things that you can do in your own home, in your own schools, and that sort of thing. And the state has programs to help you do that. I can talk to you afterwards maybe and give you my card. Yes, ma'am.
Chris Smith, City Club member. Alan, I think you're being a little hard on yourself as an engineer. The petroleum economy is only a couple centuries old and really only dominant in the last century. I'm a big fan of the business plan. I've been to the last several summits. I was delighted to hear that sustainability was going to be our competitive differentiation. But I'm a transportation activist, so I immediately went to the transportation section of the playbook. And I was surprised because I only found the word sustainable in there once, and the context was sustainable funding. My question is, when will the sustainability principle boil down to thinking about how we organize our transportation systems in the business plan?
The last part, can you repeat?
Sure. When will the theme of sustainability work its way down through the whole business plan to the transportation section?
Yeah. When we did this, you got to remember, I mean, there's 8 people sitting around the table. We come up with this idea of sustainability. I'm halfway out the room. You know, everybody's running for the hills. And then finally we came back together and said, hey, this is it. And then the next step was, okay, what is sustainability? And the concept of not just managing the environment, it's economic development in harmony with the planet, which includes transportation, education. We haven't completely fleshed that out. The point that you make of when is it going to get into the transportation agenda, we haven't completely fleshed that out. But obviously, transportation is a key component of this. In my portfolio that the governor gave me, I have transportation, I have energy, I have economic development, technology, innovation. So it all comes under my portfolio. I've only been there for 4 days. I'll use that for about another year or so. But maybe if I can come back in about a year, I can give you a better answer than that. Thanks.
Ray Polani, a City Club member. Again, transportation. You know, transportation investment is what's going to determine what we will be. And it seems to me that for a number of years we've been talking about balance in transportation. A balance to me conjures the idea of 50-50. But if you look at the funding, certainly 50-50 is not the funding that we have given to the most efficient way of moving goods and people, which is rail, both freight and passengers. I think you mentioned Germany and Japan. Well, Germany and Japan have half of our consumption because they have a very efficient rail system. So I suggest that it's going to be very important that we finally provide balance in our transportation investments, which means 50-50. When are we going to do it?
I've only been on the job for 4 days. Let me tell you about one of the things that I have picked up in discussions, and it actually fascinates me, is that if I just take roads for a second, but I think you can expand this analogy to any of the transportation modes, airports, whatever, is if I just look at roads, it is prohibitively expensive, i.e., so expensive we cannot possibly do it, to size the roads so that there's zero congestion at rush hour. You can't, it's impossible, right? There's not enough money in the state to do that. So consequently, you're dealing with the problem of how much congestion is acceptable. And it's sort of like a networking problem in the internet and what you do in networking is you intelligently route things. Packets are routed along different routes where there's less congestion, and where you have the most congestion, you feed stuff off. And it's really, I'm sure transportation people have thought about this for a long time. For me, it was kind of new, is I have plenty of bandwidth. I mean, I have plenty of routes. It's just I have all the wrong packets on the wrong routes at the wrong time. So looking at ways of intelligently routing and dynamically rerouting when you have problems and issues, if you have an accident, if you have a water main break like I heard we had just the other day, and dynamically using that, using technology to help us do that. You know, computers are really cheap in comparison to roads, right? Intelligent vehicles are very inexpensive in comparison to roads. Roads are the most expensive way to solve this problem. So one of the things that I hope that I bring to the Salem is maybe a little different way of looking at some of these things, and I think that can be applied to trains and also airports and that sort of thing. So I didn't directly address your question, but I hope I'm at least sensitive to the issue. Okay.
Barbara Dudley, City Club member. I teach at Portland State in a graduate program in sustainability that has 3 legs. There's the ecological, the economic, and then the social, where I teach, which is the least glamorous and least understood of the 3 legs of the stool. And I was very pleased to hear you talk about Detroit and realizing that it wasn't the fact that you had unions and healthcare and decent salaries that caused the problem, but perhaps the product. And I'm hoping that that conversation, I'm wondering if that conversation is happening either in the business plan, where I didn't see it in the written materials, or in the governor's office.
Well, it certainly is happening in the governor's office, because what I'm telling you today, I say in Salem every day that I'm there. And yeah, it's a rather heretical point of view. I understand that completely. But part of it is I was a design engineer in the automotive business. I mean, I worked in that role. And I did competitive vehicle analysis with Japanese vehicles in 1975, 1976, 1977. And I saw the reaction that we had to that. And I think a lot of this is you've got to look at these problems a little bit differently than we have in the past. I think if we use the same techniques that we used in 1945, 1955, 1965, and apply them to problems that we face in 2006 and 2007, we're going to come up with the same kind of solutions you came up with in 1945, 55, and 65. And with everything that we've done, hopefully you get some folks involved in this that have solved some of these problems, you know, in the last 10 years or so. And I think we'll see a different solution set. So thank you for your comments.
I'm Bob Wise, a City Club member. I wanted to ask a question about, say, Susan, the new City Club member. Is that okay? I wanted to ask whether you think it's time and whether it's possible for Oregon to actually have a sustainability strategy, kind of something we could show people rather than show them our checklist, and whether you think maybe we could also have a marketing strategy around our strategy, whether you think we're getting to that point with the kind of leadership cluster we have now.
I've only been on the job for 4 I think obviously that's one of the reasons why I'm in Salem. I think there's, you don't have a business person that comes into a job like this and have me accept the fact that there isn't a plan, there isn't a strategy, there's not metrics. We're going to put a plan in place, put a strategy in place, put goals and objectives in place, put metrics associated with those goals and objectives, track our performance against those goals and objectives, and be very, very focused on what we're doing. And I hope the thing that I can bring is some of that business perspective, some of the sensitivities that I've had, and hopefully a resonance of what the state wants and what we aspire to, and then bridge it over to the people that are currently in the government that are doing a phenomenal job. I mean, I am so impressed with what people in Salem have done, and they've been so receptive to me and some of my ideas. It's been a wonderful experience, but it's only 4 days. Yes.
My name is Sharon Joy. I am a member of the City Club. My brother is a consultant for the World Health Organization in the Far East. And My son has 1/3, he's a troubleshooter for Lexus, the western third of the United States. And I read The Toyota Way, okay? And I think that it points out that what we need is better methods and higher objectives. Now, my life is sustainable, but that isn't good enough. It has to have a quality of life. And I feel that even making a sustainable as our highest objective isn't good enough. So what I'm asking is that we have better methods, like the Toyota Way, even of getting these things. The government does not have a really good method of the ideas flowing. So we need to start from the beginning. Anyway, how can we start that change?
I think, amazingly enough, a Democratic governor picking a Republican high-tech executive who's the descendant of Ronald Reagan's cousin is a pretty good first step. I think it's an amazing statement of bipartisanship, and I think that's the first step, is we have to do this in a bipartisan way. The next thing is, hopefully, applying some business practices, hopefully best practices, not necessarily what I learned at Ford, but some other business practices that we've developed over the years, to solve these problems and put a methodology in place and set goals and objectives that are aspirational, not just good enough, but truly aspirational goals and objectives for this. And if it's going to require everybody in the state to step up and do this. This isn't something that I can do. It's not something that the governor can do. It's not something that the legislature can do. Each and every person in the state has to step up and say, A, we're going to be an example. We're going to be a shining example for the rest of the world. And B, we're going to step up and we're going to do what it takes to be global leaders in this area. Because if we can do that, the higher education system is going to take care of itself. K through 12 will take care of itself. Medical insurance will take care of itself. Healthy kids will take care of itself. But first we have to step up and we have to seize this opportunity. And I don't know of many places on earth that have this opportunity presented to them at this point in time. And this is the place.
Hi, my name is Stacy Mark. I'm an attorney. I'm almost embarrassed to admit that. Many businesses that don't practice sustainability are economically viable because they don't have to pay the true costs of their products. They don't have to pay the costs for polluting. They don't have to pay the costs to the environment. They don't have to pay the costs of disposing the product once the useful life is over. Is there any thought within the state to shifting those costs back to these companies? And wouldn't that create a tremendous economic incentive and level the playing field for the companies that are practicing sustainability?
There certainly are incentives in place for companies that are doing things in a sustainable, eco-friendly manner, and the state has lots of incentives for doing that. I think the other thing, the much more powerful thing, and this is the R side of me coming out, is consumers buy products from companies that you respect their practices. If the consumers move, if the consumers buy products from the companies that you respect their business practices, and you do it en masse, the other companies are forced to respond to that. The government can provide an environment, but there's not enough money in the government to sort of pay people to behave differently than what the market is telling them to behave. So my message to consumers is buy the right products. And I think the signs in Oregon are we're already doing that. We're moving to smaller vehicles. We're moving to hybrid vehicles. We buy fuels that are eco-friendly fuels. And then the governor is leading with the state of mandating all renewable energy in the state by 2010, in the state offices by 2010. and then also the renewable fuels fleet that we're putting in place.
Kurt Wavering, member. One of the strongest parts of our economy has been forest products. And I'm wondering what the plan deals with about sustainable forest management practices. And if you have time left over from that, your comments as a businessman about the kicker.
Okay. You don't mean the field goal kicker, do you? Let me talk a little bit about forest products. There's an opportunity here that's really coming together where we have a term that I never knew before, woody biomass, that is clogging the forests and contributing, I think everybody pretty much agrees, contributing to the forest fire potential. That is an opportunity for us to harvest some of that and use it to create power in a sustainable manner. And it's really bringing together some pretty diverse groups, and I'm very, very encouraged with what I'm seeing. Also, I'm encouraged with, at least what I've heard so far, the behavior of the forest products companies that want to develop in a sustainable manner, genuinely want to develop in a sustainable manner. So I'm very encouraged with that and sort of the direction that things are going. I will touch on the kicker. I think it's a tough problem for me as an executive. It's very difficult to ever go back to your shareholders and say, hey, I think we should pay more tax, which therefore lowers the earnings of the company even marginally. But I think in particular there are some areas where we can argue about if we spend the money perfectly, if our investment is perfectly tuned, and let me talk about education for a second. And we could probably do better in that area. But I think the other thing is, I don't believe we are funding it at a level that is world-class and world competitive. If I look at any of the metrics in terms of dollars per student, and you can argue about this, we're not in the upper quartile of countries or economies in terms of spending for our kids. So, yeah, we can argue about is the money being spent as efficiently as possible, and I'm the first one to look for efficiencies. But I think we're just underfunded. I think the corporate kicker is actually a pretty good way to create a fund that can be used in economic downturns. The governor's proposal is to use it for a rainy day fund. And with the volatility of our tax base based on personal income, I think we need that. The raising of the corporate minimum is to fund the Head Start program for kids. So generally speaking, I think we need more money for education. I think we need more money for the kids. It's never a good time to go back to your shareholders, but I think if we have an environment here that people aspire to come to and move to and raise their families in, it's long-term going to be good for the corporations. So I support both the kicker and the minimum. Thank you.
I'm sorry to say we're out of time. On behalf of the members and guests, or on behalf of City Club, I'd like to thank members and guests for your participation here today. I'd like to thank our radio and television audience for your interest in City Club. And I'd like to ask you to join me in thanking Alan Alley for a most enlightening and exciting presentation. Don't forget to join City Club if you haven't, and we are adjourned.